Hello friends! Welcome to Daily Sourdough. The very most sought after recipe is sourdough cinnamon rolls, especially cinnamon rolls that stay soft and fluffy and tender for several days. And today we're going to talk about how to achieve that. It starts with a method called tangzhong. And that is simply making a roux with a little bit of your flour and your milk before you start the recipe. So that's what we're going to do first. Let's go to the stove and make our tangzhong. When using tangzhong in your recipe, you use a portion of the flour and the water or the milk that goes into your recipe. So here I have all of the milk that goes into my cinnamon rolls and all of the flour, and I'm going to take a portion of that to make my roux, which is another word for tangzhong. And in a recipe, you don't want to use more than, say, 8 to 10% of the flour that you're going to be using in your recipe. And usually the ratio of liquid to flour is 5 to 1. For this recipe, we're going to use 3 tablespoons of flour, and I'm taking it right out of my flour bowl, putting it directly into the pan. And then 10 tablespoons of milk. Now over medium heat, stir this until it thickens up, just like a roux when you're making a white sauce. And creating this type of a gelatinized flour milk mixture somehow works a little magic and keeps your breads, your sweet breads, whatever bread you're making, softer longer. Now transfer this tangzhong to a separate little bowl so that it can cool before adding it to your recipe. Now while the tangzhong is cooling off, we'll start the rest of our dough, and we need to use a very active starter. And as you can see, this is very active. It's starting to spill out over the top of the crock. And add 2 cups of this very active high hydration starter. And as you can see, I'm not really measuring, but I know that once stirred down, this crock holds a little more than 2 cups. So I'm going to just eyeball it. Then add the remainder of my 2 cups of milk and 1/2 cup of water. And we'll stir this and allow the starter to dissolve. And while that is dissolving, we'll move on to the next step. In a separate bowl, beat up 2 eggs, 2/3 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of oil, and I'm using avocado oil because of its very light taste, not much taste to it, and 2 teaspoons of salt. And just mix this up until your sugar is dissolving and your eggs are whipped up nicely. Everything is well combined. Now while the sugar is continuing to dissolve, we'll move back to our starter mixture and stir that a little bit more so that it really softens up in that milk before we add some flour. Now to your starter mixture, add 4 cups of flour. We have a total of 7 cups, and right now we're going to add 4. And this is all-purpose flour. Once you've mixed the 4 cups of flour in, let this rest on your countertop, cover it with plastic or a wet towel, and let it rest in autolyse for 30 minutes before we add the rest of the ingredients. While your dough is autolysing, add your tangzhong to your egg mixture, and this will allow it to cool down a little faster, plus it will help it dissolve and into your egg mixture, make it easier to incorporate into your dough. And now add all of this to your dough in this larger bowl. And then just stir it until it begins to come together. It'll take a minute because it's pretty gooey. And this is when it's time to get dirty. And using your hand, just gently massage your dough so that all the ingredients come together. Just give it some love squeezes. The warmth of your hand will begin to activate your live bacteria. And oh, they'll be so happy. Get a little gentle massage. Some love squeezes. Of course, you can use a stand mixer to mix these cinnamon rolls. It would be perfect for that. But I really enjoy mixing it by hand. I like the feel of the dough. It helps me know what my dough needs. And I also think it adds an element of love to the cinnamon rolls themselves. And now that you can see the egg mixture is well mixed in, so now add the rest of your flour, but add 1 cup at a time so that you don't add too much. You want a very soft dough. So just start with 1 cup at a time to make sure you don't add too much. And then when that's mixed in, add another cup. And as you can see, my dough is extremely sticky still. So I'll add my last cup and we'll go from there. So that's a total of 7 cups. Once this is mixed in, we'll see if I need to add any more or not. When you're mixing your dough, keep in mind the fact that you'll be doing 3 rounds of stretch and folds, which then will tighten the gluten significantly and it won't be near as sticky at the end. So you don't want to add too much flour, hoping that you'll achieve that before your stretch and folds, because the stretch and folds, they do so much good in tightening up that gluten. So even though it's really sticky now, I'm going to just leave it at the 7 cups of flour and then let it rest. At this point, cover your dough and let it rest an hour, and then do a series of stretch and folds. Do 4 complete rounds of stretch and folds. We'll see what the texture of the dough is like. If it's still this sticky, then we'll stretch and fold with a little bit of flour on the last one. So cover this up and let it rest 60 minutes. After my series of stretch and folds, you can see that the gluten really has tightened up quite a bit. However, it's still extremely sticky. But I've decided to not add more flour at this point. I'm going to let it ferment overnight and see how it behaves in the morning after that. So, because I want my dough to be very soft, I don't want to burden it with extra flour. So, cover this up, let it rest overnight in the refrigerator, and then we'll roll it out in the morning. I am so glad that I didn't add any extra flour to the dough, even though it was really sticky. And you can see that it is still pretty sticky dough, but with all the stretch and folds and now letting it bulk ferment, the dough is really soft and still gonna be workable, but very soft dough, so it'll make excellent cinnamon rolls. And you can see it rose really well. Now it's time to shape the cinnamon rolls. And today I'm going to show you a couple of new ways to shape your cinnamon rolls, just to give it a little flair when you're cooking for company or you want to serve something special. So we have two. Of course you can shape it the usual way with rolling it into a jelly roll and then slicing it. But today I'll show you two new ways. First, I'll flour the countertop. Since it is sticky dough, I'll have to use some flour today. And I'll flour the top and underneath, and then I'm going to cut this dough in half. Just put one to the side. This is when a bench scraper really comes in handy, because it just scoops it right off the counter without any trouble. Now this half I'm going to cut in half again, and then roll each of these out separately. So just as you would with a regular cinnamon roll, roll it into a rectangle. And see how sticky that is? So we'll just add a little flour on top. You don't want to add too much flour though, it'll just stiffen up your dough. We want these to be soft. Then put your filling in, and I'm going to do the traditional butter, and I always use brown sugar because it makes a richer filling than white sugar, but of course you can do that. You can also add raisins to this if you'd like. It makes a very pretty roll with raisins as well, or even nuts. And then a heavy dose of cinnamon. Don't skimp on the cinnamon or you won't have as much flavor as you want. Now roll this up just as you would jelly roll style. And then pinch the seams together because you don't want your filling to fall out. So pinch them really well, seal that up, and then cut this one in half. Next, lay them side by side. At this point, it's probably easiest to transfer your dough to your pan, and if you want to put it on parchment paper, it's easy to transfer back and forth. So get the parchment paper and the pan ready. And now lay each log on your parchment paper side by side. Now with kitchen shears or a knife, cut your dough in 1.5 inch segments, but only snip about 3/4 of the way in. So you're going to leave the inside ridge uncut. So you're only cutting the outside, just like this. Just make a slit and then all the way down your dough, and then do the same thing on the other log. Next, pick up each slice and twist it outward so that it's laying flat on your pan, and the cinnamon sugar is exposed. The second slice, twist it towards the center and then alternate that back and forth. So pick up a slice, and if it's not cut far enough, just take your scissors and snip it a little further. So pick up each slice and twist it so that the cinnamon sugar is exposed, and alternating inside and outside. Then repeat that with the other one so that they are overlapping each other, kind of touching, not necessarily overlapping, but they're touching each other, and they're going to bake together. So just like that. Now cover your cinnamon roll, and I don't even know what to call this. You can call it a tree or a rope, or I don't know, you name it and tell me what it should be called. So cover this up and let this rise until they're really nice and puffy. Could take a few hours depending on the the heat in your home. And so lay some plastic over it and set it in a warm room until they look like they're nice and puffy and ready to bake. And then we'll move on to the next style. The next style is more like a cinnamon twist. It's really pretty, especially when you add raisins or nuts to it. Kind of gives it a little more texture. It's very, very pretty, very nice. Start out the same way by rolling it out so that we can put our filling in. So just roll it into a rectangle. Spread your dough with butter and your cinnamon sugar. And I'm going to put walnuts in my cinnamon twist today because my mother just harvested her walnuts off of her tree and then shelled them so nicely for me. So I'm going to add these fresh, delicious walnuts to this cinnamon twist. Oh, that's so delicious. Now on this one, you need to roll it up pretty tightly. As best you can, really pinch that together and roll tightly. And then seal a seam really snugly so that it doesn't pop open. And then you want to roll it over so that the seam is underneath. And that will help seal it even further. And then put just a little bit of flour down the center because you're going to cut down the center and you want it to be a nice clear cut and not really stick to your knife. So just put a little flour down the center. Using a sharp knife, make a slit from about 2 inches from the top all the way to the bottom. And you're going to cut the dough clear through. Make a clean cut all the way down. But leaving about 2 inches at the top. And open up your dough so that, oh, you can see the filling is trying to come out of there. You're going to open up the dough, trying to keep it together. Pick up one side and lay it over the other. And the filling is facing upward. Then continue that with the other side so that you're just twisting the bread. And my dough is just too soft to do this. It doesn't want to twist at all. So lay it over the other one. Straighten it out. And just repeat that process of lifting it up and laying it over the other side. Repeat that all the way down. Lifting it up gently, laying it across. Straighten it out. Whew, we made it. Now, put some of that filling back in. Get your parchment paper ready again because we have to transfer the dough to the pan. It's nice to use parchment paper for these because generally you want to transfer it to a pretty dish, serving dish of some sort, and this will help you accomplish that. So now we have to get this bread onto the pan. And to finish our twist, we're going to kind of shape it into a spiral, half of it going this way, pinch your ends together, and then spiral the bottom half going the other direction. Then pick it up and place it on your parchment paper. If you need to reshape anything, go ahead and do that. And isn't that so pretty? Even though it's kind of tricky to manipulate, it turns out so pretty. And I'll cover this and allow it to rise until it's not quite doubled in size, but close. And then we'll bake it at 375 for roughly 25 to 30 minutes. depending on your oven. So just keep an eye on these and bake your rolls approximately that much time until they're starting to darken. And then the third way, of course, is the traditional style where you create beautiful little rounds with your dough. And if you're not familiar with how to do that, we'll finish the dough with that. Butter a 9x13 pan, and of course you could cook it on a cookie sheet, and you would have more defined cinnamon rolls that have their own edges, own outside edges. But if you want to have very soft sided cinnamon rolls, then baking it in a pan with sides will help you achieve that, just depending on what style you want to make. Then cut your dough in about 1.5 inch slices and place them in your 9x13 pan. And I always press them down just slightly, but you certainly don't have to. But I just prefer them spreading out a little more than rising only upward, because they're going to rise upward as well, but I like them to spread out horizontally a little bit too. Then cover these as well and let them rise until they're probably as tall as the pan, so that the tops are even with the pan. You want them to really rise nicely. These are going to be big cinnamon rolls. And then bake them at 375 for roughly 25 to 30 minutes. But just watch them, make sure they don't get too brown, but definitely brown enough so that they're cooked all the way through. Once they come out of the oven, put some frosting in a little Ziploc bag and cut a hole in the corner, and then drizzle the frosting over the top in a pretty pattern. And at this point you can sprinkle it with some additional nuts if you like. And what a beautiful dish to take to your neighbors as a gift. So friends, here you go. Variations on the cinnamon roll and a new method of making cinnamon rolls with the tangzhong method that will allow your breads, your cinnamon rolls, to stay fresh longer. And be sure to stay tuned to Daily Sourdough. I have more recipes and techniques to share with you.